Welcome to a special edition of the Darden Admissions Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. So in this episode of the podcast, we return to our ongoing Women at Darden event series with a conversation featuring Melanie Prengler, an assistant professor of business administration in the leadership and organizational behavior area here at the Darden School of Business. As always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. And now, without further ado, here's a conversation with Professor Melanie Prengler from a recent Women at Darden event.
My name is Donna Clark. I'm the Senior Assistant Dean of Admissions, and I'm here with Melanie Prengler, one of our star faculty members. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm just going to start, Melanie, with asking you to tell everyone a little bit about your background and what led you to teaching.
Yeah. So my undergrad is in psychology, actually. I never took a business class in my undergrad. I loved people. I loved learning about people. I thought it was really interesting. And in the United States, when you get an undergrad in psychology, you really kind of have to get an additional degree if you want to do anything specific to that psychology degree, whether that's research or whether that's becoming a counselor or a psychologist. So I knew that more schooling was in my future. And as I was kind of deciding if I wanted to go the research route or the applied route, the leader of an organization that I had been volunteering with in my undergrad came to me and said, "We want to start a new branch of our organization. Would you be interested in leading the charge?" And I said, absolutely. So I hit pause on my academic journey for a couple of years and helped start that nonprofit. And it was a lot of fun, but I did still want to go back and get another degree. And so I had the opportunity to go back and get a master's in counseling. And I really loved it. I found it meaningful. I loved the people that I met there. But I was taking my practicum, which is when you're really working with real clients, the same semester as I was taking my research methods class. And as meaningful as I found working with real clients, I found research to be incredibly stimulating. And so I thought, I think I need to chase this. I think I'm going to regret it if I give this up. And so I started calling around and became a research assistant for a professor named Ed Solis at Rice University in Houston. And I think the idea of becoming a professor, so I loved the research. I learned that through being a research assistant, but I also really had this this love for teaching. So there's like a bit of lore in my family. So I'm an oldest sibling. My brother is 6 years younger than me. When they brought him home from the hospital, they like set him up in his little carrier, and they had been kind of like during the pregnancy telling me like, "Oh, you're going to be such a good big sister. You're going to get to teach him everything." And so he's like literally 2 days old, and I was like trying to teach him the alphabet, and he's asleep, of course.
Oh,
and
that's adorable.
I was like, he's not listening to me. And my family's like, you got to give him a little time. But I've kind of always been like that. I love learning. I love kind of the curiosity of all that. And I love sharing that knowledge. And so that's been something that I've really always loved to do. So becoming a professor really met both of those passions for me. I love teaching and I love research. And so that's really how I came to be where I am today.
And I watched a video that you did for Darden, and it started out with you saying, "I can't imagine being anything but a professor."
Yeah, that's true. They asked me, they were like, "What would you do if you were being a professor?" And I was stumped. I was like, I really don't know.
Well, you're very good at it. Again, we hear in admissions such great comments from current students who've taken your classes. And I mentioned earlier to everyone, we are going to take some questions. We have some advanced questions of our own, but you submitted some pre-questions. And then if you put any questions you have in the Q&A, we're going to kind of toggle between your questions and our questions and the advanced questions. So put them in the Q&A and I'll be monitoring that too. But back to Melanie, you teach in the leadership and organizational behavior area at Darden. What attracted you, given your background, it makes a lot of sense, but what attracted you to that area?
Yeah, so I really was so curious about the way people, like the intersection of people and work. So I became interested in psychology. Actually, I was reading a book called A Long Way Gone by ExecMBA in undergrad. And the story is about a child soldier. And the first part is kind of like his experience being a child soldier. And the second part is really his healing process and the role that two psychologists had in kind of helping him heal from this trauma. And I just thought, wow, like what a cool way to make a difference. And it was just like I thought it was like it sounded like I would be curious about somebody's experience. I could make a positive impact on them. So I really have always been drawn to like understanding people and how they work and think and experience life. And then in undergrad, I took a class called Industrial and Organizational Psychology. It's very similar to organizational behavior, which is kind of the label that topic is given in business schools. And I loved it. I don't know. People spend at least a third of their life at work for the most part. And it just seems like such an important context to understand how we work, how we can thrive. And for me, work has always been very central to my identity and who I am. So to me, like understanding more about how people work just felt really important.
Oh, absolutely. And it's so related to your master's in counseling. And I think your background, as you were talking, I was thinking about observations of this generation and how I think it's such a healthy thing. They're very into wellness, and we're hearing reports of, high numbers of, mental health issues. So how wonderful to have a professor with your background and expertise and insight as students are navigating these things. You've done a lot of research on employees in remote work arrangements, as well as how employees can reduce systemic discrimination in their organizations via allyship. Let's talk first about remote work arrangements and talk a little bit about your expertise in that area.
Sure. So I didn't plan on studying remote work. Really, I was talking to my advisor who's like he and I are both very like travel oriented kind of people. And we were really just kind of like catching up and talked about digital nomads. He was like, "Oh, have you heard about digital nomads?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've heard about them a little bit." So digital nomads are people who work and travel full time. They don't have a single permanent home base. And we just both thought this was really cool. And I was like, "I want to know more about this. Like, what is it like for like their work experience must be just like so different." And it seems like just so much of the literature assumes that you're in a physical work location. I just thought this was really interesting. And this was actually pre-COVID. And COVID happened kind of like in the midst of data collection. And so it was really cool because I kind of got people's perspectives before and after. It became more of I don't want to say like a norm necessarily at that time in 2020, but where companies were really on board with trying to figure out how can we enable people to work if they're not at the office. So a lot of my work in that area is really figuring out how to help like the challenges that employees face when they work remotely and how they can address those. Right now, a lot of my work is focused on digital nomads specifically. But to me, that's more of a kind of an extreme context. So I think there's still lessons that can be learned for people who aren't digital nomads, who are still working remotely. So for example, the nomads, one of the big challenges that they face is they're kind of in a new location pretty frequently, depending on how much they travel. And it takes a while for them to feel like they're at work, so to speak. When we feel like we're at work, we perform better. It's easier to be more engaged. It's easier to be more present in our work. It's easier to just do better and be better employees. So I was really interested in how do they navigate that challenge? And one of the important things that they do is they kind of have like artifacts that they bring with them from place to place that helps them feel like they're at work, even if they're in a new spot. So they'll like arrange their laptop and their drink and their phone in kind of a very particular way. Or they'll have like a particular candle that they like that helps them feel like they're at work. So yeah.
Oh, so fascinating that you developed an interest in this before COVID.
Yeah.
And I'm sure your expertise is so helpful and relevant to Darden, as well as so many other organizations who are navigating these changes in the workplace.
Thanks. I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you also talk about how employees can reduce systemic discrimination in their organizations via allyship? I know that you have a lot of expertise on, and you've done a lot of work on allyship.
Sure. So there's really three allyship behaviors. I'd say 3.5 allyship behaviors. So the first is to support people. This really looks like if you see someone who's experiencing discrimination, saying like, "Hey, are you okay?" Or if something is going on in the news with the group that person belongs to, asking like, "How are you doing with all that? I saw that this happened. Do you want to talk about it?" And kind of just probably colloquially put, it's just like being a good friend to somebody. Something else that you can do is advocate for change. So if your organization has rules and policies that are discriminatory or kind of maybe even inadvertently are marginalizing a particular group of people, advocating for change or revisions to those policies. The third is kind of like internal. So this is kind of like the half. It's kind of internal. It's kind of allyship, but it's allyship towards ourselves. So it's thinking about what assumptions and biases you might have and kind of trying to pick those apart and understand those a little bit better, being aware of how those might be enacted in work situations. And then the last is confrontation. Confrontation is kind of conjures images of like a really like aggressive way of like talking to somebody. It can look like that, but it doesn't have to. Confrontation can look like as simple as being in a meeting and saying, if you see that there's somebody who's being interrupted who belongs to a marginalized group saying like, oh, I don't think she was finished yet. Would you mind letting her finish her comment? So it doesn't have to be so aggressive. It can just be stepping in and making sure that people's voices are being elevated.
Oh, those are such great tips. Wonderful. We had a question from a participant, Lauren, who sent a question in advance related to this topic. What are some strategies for leaders who want to be allies and demonstrate anti-racism, but work in an environment where DEI initiatives are considered to be too woke? We're hearing a lot about this in the news, the sort of anti-DEI initiatives.
Yes, Lauren, this is such a good question. And it's such a hard challenge to navigate. So I think like a lot of the literature suggests that it is especially challenging to make change happen when people have this kind of like identity abrasion, meaning like it feels offensive, where it's like they're telling me that I'm doing something wrong. They're telling me that I'm racist or sexist or whatever it is. And like, I don't like hearing that. And so I don't want to change. And there's this kind of like aversion to doing that. So I think one of the things is to frame some of these changes in a way that's that still achieves the end goal, which is advancing the interest of a marginalized group without necessarily having it come off as though you're telling somebody that there's something wrong with them or something like that. So, for example, instead of saying, we need to create an environment here that's conducive to DEI, if that's something that you feel like would kind of backfire in your workplace and not really actually like do what you would hope it would do, you could say we want to create a culture of respect here. It's kind of a word that really would achieve the same thing, but is a little more, it's something that a lot of people kind of can agree on, that we want to respect each other here. So small changes like that can be helpful without necessarily saying we're going to become this organization with these kind of like words that might connect in somebody's mind to something that's a little more like reactive, I guess.
Thanks. I'm just was looking at another question that came in from Elizabeth, who asked a question about another area of expertise that you have, which is women returning to work postpartum. And Elizabeth says, in her experience, I found the biggest barrier to returning to work postpartum is not the men in the organization, but women without children. Can you talk a little bit about your work related to postpartum reentry in the workforce? And then we'll get back to this question.
Yeah. Elizabeth, I'm first just so sorry that you're encountering challenges, especially from people that you kind of probably assumed would be allies to you. My work in this area started because there was a colleague of mine who is a woman. She's in academia and she got pregnant and kind of faced a lot of barriers. And some people were extremely helpful to her and some people were the barriers themselves. And so she was really curious about what does it look like to be a good ally to somebody who's returning to work postpartum. And I don't have kids, so this was kind of a new area for me. I have lots of friends who have kids. So I want to know how to help them, but I also am not privy to the details of their experience and some of the challenges that they face. And I do qualitative interview-based research. So I basically spent a couple months just talking to mothers about their experience. What does it look like to be helpful? Who are the kind of like people that stand out to in your mind as like the best ally? As you return back to work, what was it that they were doing that kind of earned them that title in your mind? And really what we learned from this project is that there's a few things that people can do. first, this was really surprising to me. So we kind of assume that like the most powerful allyship actions are also like the loudest or the most difficult. And what really surprised me is that one of the most powerful actions was people just asking if they could see pictures of the baby or asking how the baby was
Yeah,
doing.
nice.
And it just, I almost, to me, I was like, that doesn't even sound like allyship. It's just almost just like being a person. But like, it was so powerful. And the reason why was because it showed the mothers that like this dimension of their identity, which is really important,
Right.
belongs at work too, that they can bring that to work too, that it matters, that it's valued and shared, that they are felt seen and appreciated by people when they asked. Also helping them navigate HR systems. It depends on the type of company that you're at, but companies have a lot of different ways of different policies, different procedures in place. And if you are aware of those, whether it's because you're a parent or whether it's because you're a supervisor or because you're in HR, helping them navigate those can bring a lot of peace of mind. And then the last big one is kind of engaging in some kind of flexibility, whether that's time flexibility, location flexibility, as they adjust to this kind of transition back to work, giving people some autonomy if they need to go pick their kid up, if their kid is sick or whatever, letting them work in the evenings, kind of having some flexibility around that. And similarly, all of those things were really showing people that they could be both. It's called work mother self-efficacy. And it's the idea that I believe I can be both successful at being a worker and a mother at the same time. And we found that leads to higher performance, lower postpartum anxiety and depression. So really overall, and lower turnover intentions. So one of the things that came out of the interviews as well is that people actually did leave organizations where they felt like they couldn't do both.
Right.
So this is a very real concern for organizations, making sure that people who are becoming parents feel like they can do both at their organization.
Oh, I think it's so important. Oh my gosh, I'm so grateful that the students have you in the classroom to learn these tangible tips and steps that they can take to be a good ally across lots of different dimensions of the workplace.
Thanks.
I know another area, as I was researching your background, another area that I was really curious about was your passion for trailblazers. Can you talk a little bit about how that passion originated?
Sure. So when I think about like trailblazers, I was like, I need a label to capture the kind of like theme across all my research. So like remote workers, like people who are trying to make change in their organization, advancing DEI in their organization, like what theme captures all of this? And I realized the most appropriate label was a trailblazer. Like I'm really interested in people who are kind of on the frontiers of something new. If they're trying to, and I have a project on entrepreneurship as well. So this kind of like ties that in. I love when people are on the frontier of something, they're trying something new. I like personally find it to be like very courageous and respectable. And I think, in part, like this is something I see in a lot of Darden students. So I just like really love seeing this kind of like surface. I think a lot of Darden students tend to be trailblazers as well, whether that's they're innovating a new product or a new business or innovating a better way of doing things. They have such big dreams and want to really put their stamp on the world. So I kind of have this natural inclination to want to know more about trailblazers.
Oh, and what great expertise for people who want to maybe go down a path of being a trailblazer and maybe haven't done it before, but are interested in evolving in that way too. Switching gears to Darden a little bit, Darden, of course, is one of the few schools that utilizes the case method as the main vehicle for teaching. We're really proud of it. And that means a lot of cases are studied, in the Darden classrooms, the average is 500 in 2 years. What are some of the favorite cases you've written or worked on over your time at Darden?
Yeah, so I have two cases that really come to mind. First is the first big case that I wrote. It's a story about a Black police officer, and she has been observing discrimination in her organization, and she's kind of deciding if she wants to file a complaint about it. She has a sense that it's not going to go super well, but she also wants to make a difference and is kind of wondering, is this the right way to do it? And so that one brings out a lot of interesting conversation about the importance of context and timing. And so that one always leads to a very rich discussion. The other one that comes to mind, this one I didn't write, so I can't take credit for it, but it's a great case. We teach it in LO, it's an LO case. And it's about a doctor. And the question of the case is kind of about like, should he be promoted or not? And it's a really great case because the doctor is really good at what he does. He's got really great outcome rates. But he's kind of an abrasive guy. He's not necessarily, he's just like not a touchy-feely person. He's kind of aggressive. And so the question, it really brings out a really rich discussion around, well, what does it mean to be a good leader? Is it about performance or is it about something else?
Wonderful. I'm toggling between some advanced questions and some live questions from the audience. And going back to what we were talking about a little earlier, there's a great question from Miranda, who says, given your background, can you describe how Darden has fostered a sense of community and collaboration among faculty to support anti-racism and equity efforts? I know that there was just a training last week, for example, about political conflict in the classroom, but any observations in your time as a faculty member at Darden?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question. So I think, like, on the one hand, it's hard to identify just like one particular event or like, because it's kind of always part of the conversation. So, like, I know, for example, like in our teaching team meeting, so like when we teach LO, our entire group meets once a week and we kind of talk through the case, talk through what we're seeing in the classroom, talk through what we think we might see in the classroom moving forward. And really through all of those conversations, the topic is kind of, I would say broadly, like, how are we doing on inclusivity? And it's really like what students are talking. Are there any students who aren't talking? What are some dimensions of the case that might be kind of hot button for some people? And it's really just, it's kind of always just top of mind,
kind
I
of
would
pervasive.
say. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say that's my experience as well at Darden. And just for the audience too, we're really fortunate. One of our senior associate deans, Melissa Thomas Hunt, oversees the full-time residential program and is a scholar of sort of belonging, inclusivity, has taken several steps with the first year curriculum to ensure or optimize inclusivity and belonging in the classroom as well. So we're grateful for that resource. Darden has such a long-standing reputation for having the best educational experience and for its community and for the teaching faculty like you. Poets and Quants recently named Darden as one of the top 10 schools to watch. As prospective students are considering Darden, can you share how faculty facilitate that sense of community?
Yeah. I think the strongest way is to, so in the case method classroom, like a lot of the case method, I'm not sure how much the attendees are aware of what like the case method delivery looks like.
Go ahead and feel free to elaborate on that.
Perfect. Okay. So the case method, I guess like I'll compare it kind of to maybe what like my experience was in a more lecture-based classroom in undergrad. So when I was in school, I would like show up, I would usually sit in the back. I had like read the book ahead of time. I would listen to a lecture. Usually the lecture was just kind of like a retelling of the material in the book. So I would kind of see like, do I actually need to be going to class or not to like do well on the exam? And maybe I wouldn't even go to class. And it was because like there was no back and forth. It was just very like, it was a very passive classroom experience. So I kind of got the same experience learning from a book that I did from like hearing the professor just like talk about the book. Like the textbook. The case method is the opposite of that in every way, in a way that I think is much better for deep learning. So the case method is the classroom, everyone reads the case ahead of time. Everyone reads a teaching note ahead of time, which is kind of like, it functions a little bit like the textbook. So it kind of highlight the tech note kind of, if there's like leadership principles that we want people to kind of draw out of the case, that will kind of cue what they should be paying attention to in the case. And the case, for those who might not know, is like a business story, usually with the protagonist, and there's some decision that they have to work through. And we work through that decision together as a class. And through that conversation, the like principles for how they should make those decisions kind of surface. But what that looks like is we'll usually open up and talk about what are the problems going on here. And the students generate the material. So my job primarily is to facilitate the conversation in a way that is guided, but lets the student information shine.
Mm.
So I facilitate a lot of back and forth, especially in my class. So someone will say something, they'll have an opinion. We'll use the case from earlier. We'll say, yes, we should promote this doctor. He's a high performer. This is what's important. He's got good numbers. This is something we should look up to. And then I say, okay, reactions, comments, does anybody disagree? And then someone might say, well, actually, like, we shouldn't put people who are mean, like, in leadership. This is like, he's not going to be a good leader for that reason. And I might say responses to the first person and kind of facilitate this back and forth. So there's this kind of thought community that's being developed in the classroom all the time. And this is something that all the faculty do at Darden. This is like a shared value that we all have. So I think in that way, the students really get to know each other, because people will usually say something like, oh, like, I worked in a hospital and I had doctors like it. So you kind of like get some of knowledge and understanding of your classmates' backgrounds. But you also kind of get this deeper level knowledge too about how they think and what they're thinking, and you're allowed to respond and engage with them in those conversations. So I think faculty really help build that sense of community starting in the classroom. Darden also has a lot of outside of classroom events that students go to. So there's, I'm blanking on the name, but there's like basically happy hour on the lawn almost every week. There's first coffee every day. There's Darden Cup games. And then there's stuff that goes on even like outside of that, like different club events that are going on. So there's a ton of opportunities outside the classroom for students to get involved and connect with each other. I think where faculty come in with that is we tend to go to a lot of those events, especially while we're teaching. So like I went to the Darden Cup Games event, the like big kickoff one. I got to see all my students and wear face paint. Like I think like for them, it's like shows that there's this kind of low power distance between faculty and students. It's very supportive. And I think like I brought face paint for everybody. So it's just kind of like, hey guys, like so I teach section B, the color's orange. It's like, hey guys, we're all like decked out in orange. Like it's this kind of, it feels very much like
Fun.
a team. And I think the professors as leaders kind of can help set the example for that.
I saw a video of you as well, talking about how delighted you were. I think the students invited you to participate in an auction of some sort, or
Yeah.
and you were. It was like a nice way to feel sort of the love and care that you bring into the classroom reciprocated back at you.
Yes. They so there's this really cool auction that they do every year. It's a fundraising opportunity, and faculty get really involved with the auction. So there's somebody who takes people to like a really nice dinner in DC. There's somebody else who takes people, I think, like I want to say duck hunting. Like there's this kind of faculty kind of auction off these kind of like connection events that they'll put on. So last year, one of the things I did was me and Lauren Kaufman, who's in the strategy and ethics area, we took our like winning group of students to an arcade, and we had like an arcade tournament.
Oh, how fun.
That was a lot of fun. But I think the event that you're referring to, so my students wanted to put on, there's a show called Hot Ones. And
yes, that's right. That's the video I saw.
So the gist of Hot Ones, like the real show Hot Ones, is there's an interviewer and an interviewee, and they like eat hot wings and they like increase the spiciness, and they answer questions while they do this. And the original idea with that was when people are kind of like dealing with the stress of how hot the food is, they kind of have to be more authentic.
Oh,
and so my students
funny.
were like, we want to do a Hot Ones. Will you like do a Q&A? And so I did the Hot Ones. I will say I made it all the way through to the spiciest. I'm from Texas. I love spicy food. I was like, this actually was a lot of fun. I could handle the heat. But that was a lot of fun. And I think like more than that, it just felt so, exactly like you said. Like I felt very much like my care for them was being reciprocated. It felt so special that they wanted me to do that with them.
Yeah, and so nice. I would imagine for a faculty member, we really talk about the great community we're a part of, but so nice to be a part of a community, not only where the students feel the love from the faculty, and Darden is so well known for the quality of the teaching faculty, but to have faculty members who want to have that kind of interaction that you're talking about with auctions and Hot Ones and painting faces and, going to lawn games for Darden Cup and things. So that's wonderful. What, on that note, what led you to choose to be part of the faculty specifically at Darden? Tell us a little bit about that path.
Yeah. So, Darden faculty are like, the brand is kind of like a triathlete. So they're good at research, they're good at teaching, and they're good at engaging with the practicing manager, which is like HBRs, executive education, and like obviously like MBA stuff. So for me, I was like kind of stepping back, like when I was on the job market and thinking about like where I wanted to go, I was like broadly in my career, I want to make a difference in the world. Like I want to leave like a positive mark on the world. And I don't really think I can do that by just focusing on research, teaching, or engagement with the practicing manager. I really want to be somewhere where I can do all three and where the system and the supports that exist are really set up to enable me to do that. And so for me, that made Darden such an easy choice, because here, like, teaching is really valued and research is really valued and engagement with the practicing manager is valued, and there's systems in place to help us do that. So like we have like case writing is really important here, and we have a whole case writing team who's so brilliant. I mean, this is why the cases in the classroom are such high quality, is because we as faculty have this like research knowledge that we can transition to the classroom, but we have these expert writers who know how to make it so casey and so interesting and draw out the cool points. So it helps. It's stuff like that that I knew I was going to be able to make the biggest impact possible.
And one of the things I try to amplify with students who are considering business schools and considering Darden, I'm so proud to represent a school that is so well known as offering the best educational experience and having the best teaching faculty. And at the end of the day, what can be more important than that? Because that curriculum, those faculty are going to instill skills that are so relevant and help people succeed throughout their careers. So it's such an important element to take into consideration, is the quality of the education and the quality of the teaching faculty you're going to be exposed to every single day. What do you think is Darden's best kept secret?
Ooh, okay. So I think there's two best kept secrets. One is that there's like a secret basement and you have to have like a key to get into it. But I heard about it from somebody else and I wanted to go. And in this basement, it's kind of like a museum of Darden artifacts from like basically the beginning of Darden. And so, for example, these two works of art that you see here, I found these in the basement. These were original architectural sketches when they were deciding what they wanted the Darden architecture to look like. And I was like, I can just bring these up to my office and and just have them there. They were like, yeah, no one's using them. So
how fun.
Yeah. So that was definitely a cool best kept secret. There's also this like old trunk in there that was like a gift from a faculty member to the school. Like it's just like, there's just 100 things in there like that, at least. So that's definitely one.
It sounds like I need to do like a team outing to the secret basement that I didn't know about either.
10 out of 10 would recommend. It's really cool. I don't know. You might have to butter somebody up, students, if you want to get access to it. But I think it's pretty cool and definitely would be worth taking a look if you can. The other best kept secret, I think, it's not really necessarily a secret, although I just don't hear it talked about as much, is that I think the food here is really good. So I'm vegetarian. I try to be vegan, especially when I'm out of the house. And usually what that looks like when I go somewhere is like I have kind of like a plastic container with like leaves in it and there's no dressing. Like it's just like a very boring dish. And I'm kind of just used to that. When I came here, I was blown away by the vegetarian options. There's tofu, some kind of tofu almost every day. It's not just like to be able to like get protein, feels like so savory and filling. The food quality is pretty yummy. It's nice to have options too. There's like usually more than one at least way that you can have like a really good vegetarian lunch. So I really appreciate that. 10 out of 10 would recommend.
Oh, that's good. And on the subject of food, about a month ago, one of my, when you said your food, I thought of the International Food Festival, which is one of my favorite Darden traditions, where we have 30 to 40% international students and they make dishes from all over the world and you can sample different things. But I love that the Abbott Center, the cafeteria really they're very mindful of all the international students and so many vegetarians that come, for example, from around the world too. So I love the inclusivity even in the food choices that are provided for students. So that's good. And I agree. The food is quite good. What are you most excited about with regard to Darden's immediate future?
Oh, the thing I'm most excited about, I feel like, is the attendees. So I get really excited about y'all. Like every year, every summer, I think about like, I wonder what my students are doing now. I wonder what their faces look like. I wonder what their opinions are going to be. I just get so excited about hearing from everybody's perspective. And so, like I am finished with my teaching actually for the year. I taught 3 classes in a very like short span of time. And so my next group of students that I'm going to be teaching is the incoming class next year. And so I'm extremely excited to get to meet everybody and hear everyone's opinions, hear everyone's thoughts, work through ideas, get to know y'all. So that's really what I'm super jazzed about.
Oh, that's great. Well, thanks for doing this and being a part of recruiting the next class. We really
Yeah.
appreciate that. Switching gears a little bit to Charlottesville, most people who are coming here as students are going to be new to Charlottesville and are not familiar with it. Can you talk a little bit about some of your favorite things in Charlottesville?
Sure. So probably the number one favorite thing for me is the mountain, the proximity to Shenandoah. It is so beautiful here. Right now we have someone called it, I forgot the name earlier. It's like Autumn Peak or something, but it's the trees are red and green and orange. It's so stunning. We're next to the mountains. Like it's just really, really beautiful. There's tons of hiking opportunities. There's cool lakes. The weather here is good too. So I came from Texas, which so like to me, Virginia then is like the north. So I was like, I'm worried about snow. I'm worried about the winter. I don't know what it's going to look like. And the winters here are pretty mild. The winters feel very much like Texas winters. So it gets chilly, but it's not really ever like super cold and icy. If it snows, it might stick around for like a couple days, but it really so far that I've been here hasn't really stuck around too much.
Right.
But then the summers are really nice. It's pleasant. So the weather here is really just stupendous, especially if you're an outdoorsy person like I am. I say the food scene here is really good too. It's not just Abbott dining. There's lots of great restaurants.
Yes.
So I like that a lot. There's also proximity to other places. So we're pretty close to DC, pretty close to Richmond. So if there are like other restaurants or cuisines or events or concerts or whatever that you want to get to, it's a pretty quick drive or a pretty quick Amtrak ride. So like my husband and I went to the Nationals, a couple Nationals games, which is baseball. And it was so cool to be able to do that just down the road, basically.
Oh, right. You can hop on the Amtrak and be in DC in no time. And to your point about the food, Rand McNally actually rated Charlottesville the #1 foodie town in the country a couple of years ago. The food
Wow.
scene is amazing. I read recently that you can go to a different restaurant every day of the year and not have any repeats, which is indicative of how many restaurants there are. But
Yeah.
totally agree. I have a long list of favorites myself. I'm going to just toggle to a couple of questions coming in the chat. And one is about research. This question is from Caroline, and it says, how has any of your recent findings in research led to timely discussions in your classroom?
Yeah. So I teach an elective called Talent Trailblazers, and it's really a talent management HR class. But I called it Trailblazers because I was like, I want students to be empowered and like knowledgeable to be able to blaze trails using HR systems in their organization or to set up HR systems if they're like an entrepreneur. So through that class, I have a section called Idealizing. It uses the trail model, which is a model I generated of talent management. And the I of that trail model is idealizing. And what that means is really helping employees be their best selves and perform their best for your organization. So that's where a lot of my research comes in. So we talk about postpartum allyship. There's an outstanding author named Lauren Smith Brody. She wrote the book called The Fifth Trimester. And she is a guest speaker in our class. And then we spend the rest of that class talking about postpartum allyship and kind of work through some of the model that I shared earlier about the different postpartum allyship behaviors and why those matter. So that's one way that I think it's surfaced in the classroom. And it's great because like this is where the students come in. Like this is where kind of like the importance of both the faculty member and the students come in, is because those classes are so rich when we have real parents in the class who can say like, yes, this is what my experience was, or this is what my spouse's experience was. And these are the challenges that we faced and went through. And so I think like that those discussions are particularly rich. The case about the Black police officer is also something that I teach in my elective about how she makes a difference. And I met her through my research. And so I have a project on Black police officers where I interviewed a bunch of folks, and I reached out to her after and asked if she would be willing to have a case written on her. And she said yes. So it kind of creates this nice integration between research and teaching, especially because I have so much autonomy over what all I include in my elective.
Yeah, amazing. Switching gears to another question from Aditi. Are there any small habits you feel one can adopt to build a healthier approach to dealing with conflict?
Ooh, that's interesting.
I'm not
Um,
sure if that's kind of in your area or not, but I thought it's a good question that probably a lot of us face at some point because I think most human beings don't relish conflict, but
yeah. Oh, that's such a good question. So I was thinking, my first thought was, I wonder what kind of conflict is kind of like in Aditi's mind as she's like thinking through this. But um, the I guess a couple of things come to mind. So, like, one, we often think about conflict as being negative. Like, I know I certainly do. I hate conflict. Like,
mhm,
I'm like,
me too.
I will just defer. I tend to really be averse to conflict, but conflict is actually can be extremely productive and extremely helpful. Conflict is really the context in which psychological safety develops as well, which we all know is really important. A lot of people
Mhm,
think that conflict, you have to have psychological safety before you can have conflict, but it's actually the other
mm,
way around. So if you handle conflict well, if you engage in conflict well, it creates this sense of psychological safety. So I would say like reframing your thought around conflict versus no conflict,
yeah.
and instead thinking about it as what kind of conflict are we having. So there's two different kinds of conflict generally talked about. um, One is task conflict, which is we disagree about how to achieve our goals. The other conflict is relational conflict, which is like, I don't like you or I have a problem with you in some ways, kind of more social. The strategies for dealing with those are different. So for task conflict, that's where a lot of the conversation, working through the list, working through ideas together, and kind of trying to be a little bit detached from ego and stay focused on the like shared objective, that can be really help very grounding in the context of task conflict. For relational conflict, vulnerability can be helpful. That's really difficult and when you're having conflict with somebody, but saying something like, even as simple as like, I'm feeling like we're having a relational conflict right now, are you feeling the same way, can help kind of like break the ice a little bit on that.
Right. What a great tip.
Yeah. So I think like bringing it up, and even if the person's like, yeah, like you offended me and like here's why, and if they're totally off base, like helping people feel heard, I think can be really helpful. It's like, I'm so sorry. Like s- totally didn't want to do that at all. I'm like really embarrassed, and like how can we move forward? Like something like that can be really helpful. Um, and I think like giving yourself grace too, if you're feeling uncomfortable about conflict, knowing that like it's probably not just you.
Right.
Probably the person that you have conflict with also feels very uncomfortable. And that's okay. It doesn't The discomfort doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that it's kind of an uncomfortable thing, and that's okay. You can still talk about it and work through conflict.
I love what you said earlier about reframing it. I've had a couple times in my career where there were a couple moments of conflict, but it led to an even stronger, richer
Mm,
relationship afterward.
yeah.
And so reframing it that this may lead to a new dimension or richness that you were able to get through it and be all the stronger for it. Is reframing is just so important in life in general.
Yeah, of course. I have to like shout out my students too. We were just talking. We have a class where we talk about conflict in relationships, and I started the class by asking about what were the most exceptional relationships that you've had, and like what made them exceptional. And it was
Mm,
really interesting because all of this like examples that students were sharing had something to do with like conflict. And it was this like really great teaching moment of like someone being like, oh, like we disagreed, and like when we worked through it, it was just like, wow, like we like understood each other so much better. And it's like, are we noticing a theme here? Like there seems to be like conflict is actually really important in having a rich relationship, and kind of allowing space for that.
thank you so much. Those are such
Yeah.
great thoughts. How do you think the case method benefits women in particular? And
Mhm.
related to that, can you talk about the roles that gender equity representatives, which are elected positions at Darden, play in the Darden classroom?
Yeah, yeah. So I think the case method, so there's a couple ways that I think this benefits women in particular. One is that because it's very conversational, and because the professor kind of like puts the gas and brake on the conversation, it can kind of steer that a little bit. I can ensure that different opinions come out. The other thing too is that like the case method really doesn't work if only one opinion is talked about, right? Like that's like a boring conversation. It's like,
Right.
okay, we
It
know.
wouldn't be very engaging.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have to have divergent ideas. And so it really creates this nice opportunity for people whose voices or opinions might not necessarily be dominant or may not be like what is like the held stereotype in mind of like what a leader looks like or whatever. That those really matter like significantly. It's not just that the case method creates space for those, which it does, but it's also that those are material to the course of the conversation. So I think that is definitely very helpful. The gender equity reps play a couple key roles. One is that if there are any issues that are related to gender, it's a designated person who's also a classmate that you can go to and talk to, and they're a resource for you. So like we in LO have a couple classes about gender that can be kind of like intense to talk about. And for me, I always check in with the gender equity rep beforehand and just kind of get my finger on the pulse of like, how are people feeling? What is the, like, what's the vibe right now? How are we doing? And then after that class, checking in and saying, how are we doing now? Is there anything outstanding? Is there anyone I should be reaching out to? So having them as kind of a touch point, so I don't have to just guess or assume, is a really helpful resource for me as a professor. And I think helps kind of have the students feel like they have one person that they can go to be that voice. So they don't have to necessarily, confrontation's hard for everybody. And I try to be very open, but I'm still a professor, so people might not always feel comfortable coming to me. And so it's nice for them to have someone to go to say, hey, will you talk to Professor Prengler about whatever? And for me, I always ask them, I every year call a meeting with my gender equity rep when they're elected. And I always ask the question, like for me, usually we have like 25 to 40% of our students are women. And I want to have like both voices represented equally in the classroom, but I also don't want to put an undue burden on the women in the class for like to have to talk more than is their proportion. And so the first year I was working this, I was like, I don't know what to do. And so I asked the gender equity rep, I was like, what do you think I should do? And she was like, well, let me ask the class and just see what they want to do. And so she did like a survey among the ladies in the class. And yeah, and they that year wanted to be proportionally represented. So I called on them. I think it was like whatever the proportion was of their representation in the class, and had the same conversation this year, did the same thing. And yeah, I think it was so helpful for me to, when I had this kind of question about like, how do I navigate this, to just have a person to go to who could get that information for me.
Amazing. This last question, and this doesn't have to be a singular answer, but what are some of your favorite things about Darden students?
Ooh, I always leave Q1 just like really in awe of how smart everybody is. It's just kind of amazing. The students are so brilliant. Their insights are great. And then also I just feel like I'm always in awe of how courageous people are. Like there's always people who are very comfortable talking in group settings, or the people who talk the first week usually and like really come out of their shell. They're very, and that's great. Those people are very valuable for the classroom. I'm also very moved by the people who I can tell like halfway through, you can tell that they're nervous. You can tell that they're uncomfortable speaking up, and they do it anyway, especially the people who were sharing divergent opinions that like, I know where the case needs to go. I know where the conversation needs to go. And I'm like, if nobody is willing to disagree, we're going to be a little stuck. I can see the person kind of like, like really going for it. And like, it really, I'm just like so proud of those students. And it usually opens up this kind of like 2/3 of the class that had been a little bit quieter to feel like, oh, okay, like I can speak up and it'll be okay. And so I guess like seeing the students who are like really brilliant, sharing brilliant ideas, and also pushing themselves to kind of like be a little bit out of their comfort zone and be more in a growth zone. I think it's a hard thing to do, and it's a thing that leaders have to do. And so I'm always very moved and humbled by seeing the students who are willing to do that.
Right. Oh, what a great example. Well, you mentioned just a little while ago how in awe that you are of the students, but having read a bunch of teaching reviews, everyone, they're in awe of you too, for good reason. And thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your expertise and research and approach to teaching and observations. It's been so great to have you on the Women at Darden series.
Thanks, y'all. Great connecting with you.
And that was a conversation with Melanie Prengler, an assistant professor of business administration in the leadership and organizational behavior area here at the Darden School of Business. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. You can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.